Good evening, everyone. My name is Ware Harmon, and I'm the Executive Director of Town Hall Seattle. On behalf of the rest of the staff here and our friends at Third Place Books, it's a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's virtual presentation with Dr. Shanna Swan and Stacey Colino in conversation with Steve Scher, as part of Town Hall's Arno Matulski Science Lecture Series. As we get underway, I want to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for the continued use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. And we thank you all for joining us here on our brand new streaming platform, mytownhallseattle.org. We hope you were able to reach the program easily and are enjoying the benefit of accessing your tickets and events in one virtual location at least. Like everything at Town Hall, it's very much a work in progress. So if you have any questions or concerns, please use the Patron Services email that you see in the chat below. Today's conversation will last about 60 minutes, including Q&A. Questions will be selected from those in the chat field at the bottom of the video player. You may have to scroll down to see it, and please feel free to add yours at any time. We can't guarantee we'll be able to address every question, but we'll try to get to as many as possible if you keep them concise. For those who would like to view the program with closed captions, click the CC button in the bottom right corner of the video player. Town Hall is adding new events and podcasts every day. Upcoming programs this week include Shakespeare scholar Emma Smith offering a bracing perspective on these canonical works for the 21st century. Robert Kolker in conversation with David Eagleman about the dramatic impacts of schizophrenia in one American family and what it's taught us about the condition. Psychologist Sherry Turkle sharing her path-breaking research on technology, empathy, and ethics, as well as appearances by Nathaniel Rich, Cass Sunstein, Susan Orlean, Annabelle Gurwitch, Sonora Jha, and Ijeoma Oluo. Please check out more of what's coming up, go to townhallseattle.org. Town Hall's work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. The Arno Matulski Science Lectures are supported by Microsoft, KUOW, the Norcliffe Foundation, the Wingcliffe Foundation Northwest, and the taxpayers of Washington State. Finally, Town Hall is at heart a member-supported organization, and I want to thank all of our members watching this evening. If you're not yet a member and you share our dedication to a community invigorated by broad access to ideas and creativity, we hope you'll consider a membership as well. One last piece of infomercial. You will definitely want to go deeper on tonight's topic, and so I hope you'll consider purchasing your copy of Dr. Swan's book tonight from our partners at Third Place, instead of later from, some other online retailer of books and hiking equipment and, other items. Town Hall asks you to think about keeping it local, and just maybe the things we love about our city from before the pandemic will still be here for us on the other side. And with all of that, Dr. Shanna Swan is an award-winning scientist based at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, one of the leading environmental and reproductive epidemiologists in the world. From the Department of Environmental Medicine and Public Health at the hospital's Icahn School of Medicine, she's worked for 25 years to understand the threats posed by chemicals to our environment and our health. Dr. Swan's published more than 200 scientific papers and has been featured in extensive media coverage around the world, including ABC News, NBC News, 60 Minutes, PBS, BBC, NPR, as well as magazines and newspapers like Newsweek, Washington Post, Time, many more. A regular contributor to U.S. News and World Report, writer Stacey Colino specializes in health and environmental issues. Her work has appeared in the Washington Post, as well as national magazines, including Newsweek, Parade, Women's Day, Sports Illustrated, at least a dozen others. She's written books too, beyond tonight's. She's the co-author of Disease Proof, The Remarkable Truth About What Makes Us Well from 2013. 2014's Strong is the New Skinny, Good Food Fast, also from 2014, and Taking Back the Month from 2002. Steve Scher is a podcaster, interviewer, and teacher. He worked in Seattle Public Radio for almost 30 years and has taught at the University of Washington since 2009. He is all of these things, but to us, he's also the senior correspondent for our very own podcast, In the Moment. They're assembled tonight to discuss Countdown, how our modern world is threatening sperm counts, altering male and female reproductive development, and imperiling the future of the human race. It's co-authored by Dr. Swan and Ms. Colino. Please join me in welcoming Shanna Swan, Stacey Colino, and Steve Scher.
Thanks, Ware. Appreciate it. Yeah, you almost forgot that I worked for that radio station, KUOW. The sponsor. Dr. Swan and Stacey Colino, thank you. And thank you all for being here. I look forward to your questions. This is a dense topic. There's a lot of good science. The book is very accessible with all that great science, great storytelling. So a tribute to both of you. So thank you for that. And Dr. Swan, I know you're going to lay out the roadmap for us, the problem, the causes, the consequences, solutions over this talk. But I have been thinking about how this is an important topic in the Northwest, because for many years it was a discussion about, and remains a discussion about, what are we doing to the Puget Sound and what impact is the runoff having on the people who eat the fish, the animals that eat the fish, and the people who live all around here. So this is an ongoing quest to understand what's going on. And you've been doing this really for how long now?
About 25 years. Yeah. Yeah. Looking at this. Yeah.
Do you feel that?
Yeah.
Well, when I first started doing things, I did some interviews on these topics with folks, and there was always the pushback from people who said, well, the science isn't clear. The science isn't clear. But the work you've done over all these years and the work in this book shows that the science, it seems, is pretty robust and peer reviewed about what this issue is, correct?
I think so at this point. Yes. Yeah. So what I've done in the science and what others that I work with have done is to lay out a very, if you will, secure path from the suspected causes, how they act, looking at animal studies, looking at human studies, replicating the human studies, and finally getting to the health consequences. And that takes a long time and it takes a lot of studies, but by connecting the dots in this way, you're able to go from cause to effect and actually get causation, which you can't when you just look at a single piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, that's what's so critical, right? You can point to it in the science and the work you've done in saying, this is not just conjecture anymore. This is
right.
This is not correlation. This is happening.
Yeah.
So what's the problem? Start with the problem. I know you're going to show us some slides. So start with the problem. Lay that out for us.
The problem is I'm not sure how to share my screen.
Same way you did earlier when we were practicing.
I don't see a share screen link.
Bottom.
Roll over with your mouse. You'll see it.
Yes, sure. I got it. All right, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk and show some slides. We're going to talk, and in between I'll show only a few slides. We'll start here with kind of the roadmap that I've been following actually for 25 years. So identifying what the problem is, finding its causes, its consequences, and then we're moving on, hopefully, to solutions. So the problem is huge. I believe that it's really of the magnitude of the other, global catastrophes that we're facing today. And it's something that's not nearly as well recognized as some of these other problems that we're facing. When I published this paper in 2017 that led to this cover of Newsweek, there was a huge response to this worldwide because finally people were waking up to the fact that sperm count really seemed to be declining in Western countries. This is the only graph I'm going to show you, but it's an important one. So I'll take a minute or two on it. So what this graph shows is that for data collected between 1973 and 2011, sperm concentration had declined from 99 million sperm per milliliter, that's a pretty high number, down to 47 million per milliliter, which is a pretty low number for sperm count. And that's a decline of 52% in 40 years, so slightly over 1% per year. And of course, everyone says, well, is it slowing down? Is it what's going to happen? Of course, that's the question, the $64,000 question. Well, we cut the graph and we said, well, what about the last 20 years, the last 10 years? Do we see the slope leveling off? And the answer was no. However, it is likely that we will now take action to deflect this curve in such a way that it does not hit zero by 2045. Hitting
Why do you
zero,
say that?
how are we going to do
We
that?
hope so. At least
We'll
Why-
talk,
yeah,
we'll talk
yeah,
about
why-
that.
That sounds very hopeful. We could be done. Oh, we're going to take action.
Yeah, we are going to take action because otherwise, I'm sorry, we're, on the road. 2045 median sperm count of 0 is pretty close to catastrophe. Because that means that half of men will have no sperm, and the other half, many of them will have very low sperm counts. And most of reproduction will be through assisted reproduction. And
So this is, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead, Steve.
Well, this is sperm decline in Western countries, but
This is
is
in
this a
Western-
worldwide problem?
I don't know. So we tried to get data worldwide. When we did our search of the literature, we included every country that published in English, every English language paper that was peer reviewed. However, these studies are not conducted everywhere equally because it takes some technology and a level of education to be able to do these studies that are not available everywhere. So most of these studies in the literature are from Western countries. That's changing now, and we hope to get more data from non-Western countries. But really right now, what we know is in Western countries. And we also know that this isn't just about men, and it's not just about sperm decline. So I'm going to show you one more slide and then we'll stop and talk for a while, I think. But I want you to see this nice Venn diagram, as we call it, males, females, and both. And what this diagram is illustrating is that there are problems in males, a variety of them, all of these endpoints are in trouble, and there are problems in females, and then there are shared problems, and infertility is a shared problem. And that's one of the places that we see the strongest decline. So let me stop there and talk about what I've said so far.
Well, let me
Stacey,
jump-
go ahead,
Can I
Stacey.
jump
That's
in
what I was
for one
going to
more
ask you.
So the really important thing about this Venn diagram is that all of these problems are on the increase. A lot of them are increasing at about the same rate, which is about 1% per year. Some of the others may not be quite at that rate, but they're all on the rise, and that's concerning.
When
It
did you,
also let me just say the fact that they're increasing at the same rate approximately suggests that they are linked. And so if they're linked, if they have common causes, it's likely that those causes are acting at a time when all of these endpoints are starting out. In other words, you can disturb things early on in development and disturb a lot of things by small changes. And we believe that's what's happening.
what do you mean by suggests they're linked? Why do you say suggests they're linked
Well,
rather
you
than
could
these
say-
are linked?
You could say, well, they're not causally linked. This is just association. But the data that we have goes beyond that. And we know, for example, that men that have low sperm count have reduced testosterone, have genital birth defects, have more testicular cancer, have a shorter perineum called the AGD. So all of these things are causally related, and on the female side as well. And men who have low sperm count are more likely to be infertile, and so on and so forth. So these things are not just associated. These are representing a common problem across men and women.
So Stacey, where did you come into this story? And what was your reaction when you saw for example, that previous chart?
Well, thanks for asking that, Steve. So I came in 2017. I had received a press release from a mutual friend of ours who runs a science communication nonprofit about Shanna's study, and immediately jumped on it. And I wrote an article for Vice.com about the study. And I guess it was probably about 6 weeks later, I got a call from this mutual friend, and I happened to be in New York at the time. And she said, Shanna was approached by a literary agent. She wants her to write a book about her research. Can you talk to her? Because she doesn't have any experience with literary agents, kind of give her the lay of the land, give her questions to ask, and so on. So Shanna and I ended up meeting for lunch, and this agent had a whole roster of writers that she wanted to introduce Shanna to. And Shanna said, well, would you be interested in writing this book with me? And I said, well, maybe, but if you're signing with this agent as a courtesy, you owe her the courtesy of interviewing her writers first. And then if you're still interested in me, come back to me. So, excuse me, she came back to me. I interviewed with both of them, and ultimately they asked me to do it. And I said, absolutely, I would love to. So
okay, I have to jump in here and tell you, because I think you know this, Stacey, but I designed a questionnaire because I'm a statistician, right? I designed a questionnaire, and we completed it on our interviews, each of us independently, my agent and I. And when we compared notes, Stacey was ranked #1 by both of us. It was, no question that she was the best writer for this job. So
thank you for that. Thank you for
How
that.
come? How come? What did she have? What did she have that you noted?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, she had done wonderful writing. She was interested in the question. She understood the issues, and we could communicate well. So I just felt this was a great, grounds for a great collaboration, which it turned out to be. Yeah, it was clear. And I talked to all these other people, and they were nice and they were experienced and all, but it didn't click, they didn't get it the way Stacey did.
Along those lines, I will tell you, one of the things that I remember Shanna telling me after my story came out that impressed her was that I was attuned to some of the nuances. A lot of people wrote about the sperm count decline and the numbers and the factors that might be contributing and so on. But one of the points that I really fixated on was, how is this happening? Is this just a male issue? And it turns out the answer is no. And a lot of these influences are through the women. Women are basically conduits for a lot of these exposures during pregnancy, and basically transmitting the exposures to the fetus in utero. And that was something that I really highlighted in that article. And I remember Shanna calling me out or emailing me after it came out and saying, you were the only person who pointed that out.
Yeah, right.
And so I think that scored me a lot of points.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's a real important issue, though, isn't it, Shanna?
Absolutely.
That's very critical.
The most important issue. Yeah. So let me just go on then. These chemicals that the mother is conveying to the unborn child are chemicals that have the ability to change our hormones in a really basic way. And they change the hormone systems of the unborn child at a critical period in development. And in particular, at a period that can affect the reproductive capacity of those children. So this slide shows a number of chemical classes. So there's a Teflon pan, and that's an example of something called the perfluorinated compounds. And then there's a rubber ducky, that's a phthalate, that's those chemicals that make plastic soft. And then we have the cushions illustrating flame retardants, which are really dangerous, and pesticides, which I think everyone knows about. And tin cans, because they're lined with bisphenol A, and bisphenols have the ability to increase estrogens, which are really bad at the critical periods of development. And then nail polish is another example of phthalates, a different kind of phthalates. So these are illustrating what we call endocrine disrupting chemicals, which are really the culprits here. Although there are other causes, these are the ones that I have focused my work on, mostly phthalates and bisphenol A and pesticides. I haven't done so much with the flame retardants and the PFOAs, but there's enough to do with the classes of chemicals I work with. But in addition to these, that poor sensitive fetus is also being barraged by lifestyle factors, okay? And so, you know, the kind of food that the parents eat, that the alcohol, stress is really important for reproductive function. Heat is important for sperm count and quality.
Okay.
Obesity affects fertility, and activity. These are sort of things that, you know, everybody knows. Watch these lifestyle factors. They're important for your general health, but they are certainly important for your reproductive health. So let me stop there. And I think Stacey has a nice anecdote to tell us about these lifestyle factors.
Sure. So smoking is also a really important one. One of the things that I did when we were researching the book is I actually went to a sperm bank in Philadelphia to do some research, and I interviewed the director of the sperm bank and about trends she was seeing and factors that she was seeing at play in what she noted was a declining sperm count. So they have a regular pool of donors, and they had actually expanded their outreach to new donors through local universities and gyms and whatnot. And so they have a steady stream of donors coming in, but what they were finding is that among donors, they saw a 50% decline in viable sperm from the time she started there, which was about a decade earlier. And so that's pretty notable. And one of the fascinating things, this was all so abstract to me. Sperm count declined. How do you count sperm? What does it look like? That kind of thing. So she showed me under slides, well, this is a good sample and this is a not so good sample. And you could definitely see the difference. It's not just about sperm count, which is like the number of sperm in a given grid on a slide. What they're also seeing are changes in motility, how a sperm moves, and morphology, the shape of the sperm, and also DNA fragmentation, DNA damage to the sperm. And so she was showing me these contrasting slides, like this is a healthy sample and this one's not so much. And with the not so much one, you could literally see like globs of junk on the slide, almost like detritus. And so she was telling me that a lot of the factors, she was a little bit less familiar with some of the endocrine disrupting chemicals, but acknowledged that those are contributing. But they were very fixated on counseling people, donors in particular, about lifestyle. And she told me a story about one of their regular donors who had been giving sperm there for years. And in the meantime, with all of this, they saw a substantial uptick in demand for sperm. So the problem of viable sperm going down and an increase in demand is problematic right there. So with one of their regular clients, he had been giving for years and he always gave great quality sperm. He was sort of like a star there. And all of a sudden, one particular visit, they looked at his sample, and what they would do is look at a donor sample before the donor left for the day so they could see what it looked like and provide feedback. And they said, whoa, what happened? This is not your usual sperm. What's changed in your life? And he admitted that he had actually had quite a big change, a number of changes in his life. He had started living with a woman who was a smoker, who ate a largely packaged processed food diet. He wasn't getting as much exercise as he used to, and his stress level had gone through the roof because he had started a new job. And so they counseled him and said, well, all of these factors look like they may be taking a toll on your sperm. Why don't you go back to your regularly scheduled life, spend the next few months trying to clean up your lifestyle habits, and then come back to us and we'll see what's happening. So the guy was really kind of freaked out by this and went back, and he and his partner established new rules for where she could and couldn't smoke. They changed their diet. They started exercising together. He took up stress management techniques. Long story short, 3 months later, he came back and his sperm was stellar again. So that's kind of a hopeful story, because there are things people can do to bring back what's going wrong.
Are these things that people can do even in the face of exposure to these various chemicals, or are the chemicals always going to be having a negative impact on people?
People can limit their exposure to these chemicals if they're postnatal. However, that's brings me to my next point, which is that—
Can I jump in for 1 second? Because I like Steve's question here, and I don't want to run away from it too fast.
No, I was going to come back to it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So what I was going to say is that the timing of exposure is tied to your question. So depending on when the exposure is, they can or cannot do something about it. Okay. And so if the man is smoking around the time or before, shortly before he conceives, then the child, if a male, would have a 40% on average reduction in sperm count. That is not fixable. Okay, man smokes, things get messed up, child is born, sperm count is reduced in adulthood for his life. Same thing if the mother is smoking when she's pregnant, 40% reduction in sperm count, not fixable. However, if the man himself smokes, then his sperm count is also reduced. But as Stacey pointed out, when he cleans up his act, he recovers his sperm count. So, you know, the answer to your question is complicated. Depends on when the exposure is.
But also, in response to your question, there are basically two sets of influences happening simultaneously. One is the lifestyle factors that we've been talking about, and then the other is the chemical exposures. And both of them have a cumulative effect on not just sperm counts, but other aspects of reproductive function that we'll get to. And so every positive change you make in either set of circumstances is going to help. But cleaning up your lifestyle doesn't completely eliminate the problems posed by environmental exposures, or vice versa.
I see.
And well, let me just say one more thing about timing. It's not a good news story, I guess, but the damage that's done by these chemicals and, you know, and messing up sperm and count and fertility, that's going to play out in a lifetime of higher disease rates and actually earlier death. So a number of studies have shown that if a man has a very low sperm count or a woman is infertile, that can lead to higher heart disease, diabetes, reproductive cancers, and earlier death. So some people say that reproductive health should be considered the sixth vital sign, you know, along with your blood pressure, your cholesterol, and so on, as an indicator of how your health is going to proceed over your lifetime. Is pretty basic. Yeah.
Well, going back to that first chart you showed us, that is all factors then. If you were to take smoking out of there somehow, we would still be seeing this this fertility decline because of exposure to these chemicals.
Yeah,
is that correct?
Actually, Steve, it's interesting that decline has continued despite the fact that smoking has gone down.
Except it's gone down in the US, but not so much in European countries, and they were included in the studies.
No, that has gone down. Actually, in Denmark. Yeah. I mean, I talked to Niels Jorgensen in Denmark, and he said they have a study of 20 years of you know, young men. And he said they're smoking less and less, but it has not improved their sperm count. Yeah.
Talk a bit more about what is happening to men and women being exposed to this chemical soup in their, for the eggs and for the sperm. What is happening physically to those to people?
So you want to get sort of down and dirty, if you will, into the causes here. Yeah. So it's about hormones. Okay. So these exposures are what we call endocrine disruptors. They disrupt the endocrine system, endocrine hormone. You can use those interchangeably. So they're interfering with hormone production. And the one that's most tightly tied to sperm production later in life is what's happening in the genital tract development in about the first couple of weeks of the first trimester, actually. Well, 8 weeks, 8 to 10 are probably the most sensitive. And so what's happening is the fetus is following a program, what's been genetically programmed. The testes are supposed to make this testosterone. It's going to act on the genital tract, and that male will be produced in the male typical way. And then he'll be the male baby that we all know and love. But if testosterone is reduced, and phthalates can do that, then that development doesn't follow the program, doesn't follow the program. And the result is that that boy is what we call incompletely masculinized, not quite as masculine, in ways that have to do with the size of the genitals and actually the function of the genitals. So the cells that will become sperm when he grows up are already there, and they're being affected by that exposure. The same thing is true in the female. The cells that will become the eggs are affected by exposures in early development. So the mother is exposed, the fetus is exposed, and then these germ cells are exposed because they're inside the fetus. And actually, there can be effects on later generations as well. But this is scary enough if we just go 3 generations. Yeah.
Well, you in that slide you showed for females, low birth weight, prematurity, menstrual problems, endometriosis, premature egg depletion, early puberty, miscarriage. Premature egg depletion, how are women's eggs affected by exposure here?
So a woman is born with all the eggs she's ever going to have. And if they've been disrupted, if you will, in early fetal development, then she won't have the proper number. That will be disturbed, just like the number of sperm.
In addition, during her adult life, these factors can affect the rate at which her eggs age.
Right.
So she can lose eggs, viable eggs, at a faster rate than is typical for her biological age, or she can have the same number of eggs, but they might be low quality and unable to sustain conception or a pregnancy.
Yeah, I want to say something about adult exposure because I've been focusing on the prenatal exposure, but there's a series of beautiful studies out of Harvard where they take couples coming in for assisted reproduction and they find how much of these chemicals are in the people's bodies at the time they come in for their procedure by measuring them in the urine and the blood. And they've shown that for many of these chemicals, higher levels of these chemicals affect the success of the procedure. So there's fewer viable eggs retrieved, there's fewer implantations, and there's fewer live births. So that's an adult exposure, and it's mattering, right then for the couple that's trying to conceive. Yeah.
Were there other slides you wanted to show in this section about the causes here? Or did you show them all?
The only other thing I wanted to show you was that I want to remind us that we're not alone on this planet, and multiple species have shown effects of these chemicals even to the extent of being endangered or, maybe wiped out. The alligator was shown very early to have a small penis in response to pesticides in the lakes in Florida. I don't have a frog here, but frogs have been shown to develop with ovaries and testicles in the same organism when they're exposed to atrazine, a pesticide. Birds have been shown to have altered sexual development exposed to these chemicals. So this is a whole, we're not alone, and of course, why should we expect that everyone on the planet wouldn't be exposed? And they are, and they're suffering along with us.
Yeah, you wrote, if these trajectories continue, in vitro fertilization or other artificial reproductive techniques may become a widely needed tool for conceiving children. I mean, 2045, that slide showed who's going to be having babies in 2025? Wealthy Westerners who have the means and who have saved their eggs when they were in their 20s.
Right. And as Stacey pointed out, the availability of adequate quality sperm and eggs is actually decreasing as well.
I wanted to address a common, it's not a criticism of the book, but it's a point that a lot of people use to kind of push back against some of these messages. And that is the idea that maybe this is Mother Nature's way of initiating course correction, that the planet is overpopulated, we don't need more people. And we have addressed that in the book in numerous ways. One is to say that we have a problem, a demographic shift that's happening where we have more older people and fewer younger people to help take care of the older people in many Western countries, and social institutions like Social Security and pensions and things that we have built to take care of people are going to suffer as a result because there aren't as many people working to support those institutions. But the thing that bothers me more about that argument is that even if you believe that this is a form of course correction or that this is a good thing for the planet, it's a really painful way to get there. That people are discovering that they are having these problems having children. People think of the ability to have children as a basic human function and a human right. And so it's very painful and disappointing for people to discover that they can't. And people spend a lot of money going for assisted reproductive technology and techniques to try to get pregnant and have children. And a lot of these procedures are very painful to the woman, for the woman. And so even if you think that it's Mother Nature's way of course correcting, it's a pretty nasty way to do it.
Well, also, there are plenty of ways to reduce population pressures instead of poisoning ourselves and all the other creatures on the planet with us.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And the fact that all of these effects have ripple effects on our health and longevity later. It's not just about having babies.
Yes.
Will you expand on that a little bit? Because you said this is one generation or two generations we could talk about, but these have effects all the way down from fathers to great grandsons, don't they, Dr.
That's
Swan?
correct. That's correct. And there actually have been in animal studies shown to be effects up to 7 generations. However, let me tell you the flip side of that, which is actually a good news story. I'd love to add a good news story here because we're talking about so much doom and gloom. So in the University of It's in Washington. I want Pullman, Washington.
Washington
So
State.
Pat Hunt showed that if you take a rat or a mouse and you expose it to, I think she exposed it to an estrogenic compound, and then you don't expose any further generations. In other words, they're clean living all the way through. In 3 generations, that the male and the female will have full reproductive function. So you can reverse this, you can fix this if you don't expose successive generations as we are doing. So, yes, it is carried over from one generation to another, but it doesn't have to be. And those are the changes we want to make. And so I just want to talk about, can I do that? Talk about some of the things we can do?
Yes, please. And if folks have questions, submit your questions, and we'll get those to our guests too. Yes, go ahead. What are the solutions?
So first of all, before we can start fixing things, we have to recognize that most of the chemicals that we're exposed to have never been tested. And this is a surprise to a lot of people because they think, oh, the government will take care of this, but they don't. They do pretty well on drugs, but for chemicals in our daily lives, they don't. So what can we do? So
can I expand on that, Shanna? Let's expand on that for 1 second, because there's sort of a mantra that goes with that chemicals are assumed to be safe until proven otherwise.
Right.
And people don't realize that.
Right.
So it's only retrospectively that people and manufacturers and regulators realize, oh, there's a problem with this. It's already on the market. It's already been used and exposed to lots and lots of people. Now we have to get the genie back in the bottle. What do we do now?
It's that the reality is that we are the guinea pigs. It's not tested in a laboratory. It's not tested in anybody before it's used. Then it's put out in the market. And then you see, does it cause harm? Oh, well, that's a mistake. We've got to change that. Well, that takes, took us 20 years to find. Anyway, so there's 3 R's I just want to tell people. The first is to remove these chemicals that are hormonally active. That's absolutely critical. And we have to remove the chemicals that cause harm at low doses. We haven't talked about dose levels, but people say, well, these doses are so small, how could they possibly be harming us? Well, the answer is, when you're exposed at a sensitive period, they cause huge harms and permanent damage. They can't be environmentally persistent. And many of these chemicals do persist in the environment. And again, as Stacey pointed out, they haven't been tested. So we need to remove them, and then we have to replace them because people we need these products and we need to replace the chemicals that they're made with, but without hormone disrupting effects, without endocrine disrupting effects that don't have low dose harmful effects, don't persist, and are safe prior to marketing, okay? And by the way, in the EU, they do have that principle that things have to be shown to be safe before they are marketed. So many, many more things are restricted in Europe than in the United States. And finally, we have to regulate the chemicals much, much better than we're doing it. First of all, we have to regulate them at all. So many are not even regulated at all. And we have to look at these low dose effects, which can be so harmful, and effects of mixtures. We're exposed to hundreds of chemicals at once. And if you took hundreds of drugs at once, you'd wonder, like, what is that doing to my body? Your doctor would wonder, what are you taking when you come in for a new drug? But we don't worry about these mixtures, and we have to. And we have to assess how long they're going to stick around in the environment. And we have to test the untested chemicals. And I think with these steps, we can actually make that curve turn up and escape the decline in 2045. And we talk about this, of course, in the book, and I just want to put in a plug for the book. It was published on February 23rd. And it shouldn't say pre-order because this is an old slide, but if you order it, if you want, you can order. I won't say, I shouldn't even show you this because you want it to go through your bookstore. So buy it. Forget that, but do buy Countdown. And we're asking people, by the way, if you support this, take a selfie of yourself with the book and post it on your social media pages with the hashtag #CountMeIn. And we're hoping in this way to get a lot of support for this movement that we're trying to generate. Yeah.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, go ahead. And then I'll ask 2 questions. Go ahead.
So one of the things, so we were just talking about what needs to be done sort of on a higher level in terms of society, regulations, and so on. And that's all really important. And we need to urge our representatives and our government to adopt these regulations and these testing protocols. In the meantime, we can all do things to protect ourselves at home in our daily lives. And there are loads of practical strategies for doing that in the book. People always ask me when they hear about the book, so what do I need to do? And it's like, I can't tell you just one thing. This is why we wrote the book. There are lots of things you can do, and they're easy, they're practical. But I will give you one thing that's an easy fix, and that is get rid of the plastic containers in your kitchen. Don't use plastic for food storage. People know not to microwave in plastic, but don't even put it in plastic. Get glass storage containers instead. And when you go buy olive oil or vinegar, buy it in a glass bottle, not a plastic bottle. And that way it won't absorb the chemicals that are in the plastic.
Steve, do we
What
have
else? Give us
a minute for an anecdote? Can I tell you one anecdote? Or is it, I don't know what the time is.
No, go
Yeah,
ahead.
do we have time?
You're good.
Yeah, okay. So I just want to tell you why, something that may convince you of what Stacey's saying. If you, in our hospital, Mount Sinai, we've done the following study. You go to the neonatal intensive care nursery, and there are these newborns, these preemies, and they're in their little bassinets, and they have all these tubes coming into their body, and these tubes are carrying nutrients, right? And so the nutrients go directly into the body, and the number of tubes attached to the baby is exactly proportional to the amount of phthalates that's recovered in their urine shortly after that. So it's very, very clear that the phthalates are leaving the tubing and they're going into the nutrients, getting into the baby, being metabolized, being peed out, and are measurable in the urine. And that's exactly what happens when other foods that we eat in other settings, like spaghetti sauce being processed through tubes going into a jar, or milk in a milking machine going into a bottle of milk. Every time food goes through plastic tubing, particularly if it's warm, it pulls the phthalates out of the plastic, and then they end up in our bodies. So believe it. Yeah.
And in the process of going through our bodies, they are disrupting our endocrine system?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly what they're doing.
What you also have in the book, besides the plastics, you talk about scented products and
Yes.
products that people use for beauty and healthcare. These
Right.
are all products that
So
can be.
So in addition to making plastic soft and flexible, phthalates add scent. They hold scent. They help the product retain the scent and retain the color, and also increase absorbency. So if you're making a hand cream, you want it to be absorbed, you'll put phthalates in it. You want the scent to stay in the product, you'll put phthalates in it. And so we asked women, how many products did you use before you gave us this urine sample? In the last 24 hours, what products did you use? And the number of products that they use and the kind of products they use were directly related to the levels of phthalates in their urine. So it's not complicated. You know, it goes in, comes out, you can measure it. And along the way, as you say, it disrupts your hormones.
So it's scented things, it's plastics, anything else to, when we talk about the practicality, any other products that we might look around our homes and say, well, let's stop using this.
Tin cans.
Scented cleaning products. I mean, there's so many. And
air fresheners.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
There are
Dust.
lists and lists, room by room in
Right.
the book. We can't possibly cover them all here, But in terms of personal care products and cleaning products, what you can do is read the ingredients list on the bottle. And if you see words like phthalates or
Parabens or
parabens, bisphenol, put it back. Don't buy it, and go for something that's more natural.
Are there products in Europe, since the EU has done some efforts to do a better job? Are there replacement products that have been proven to be safe? Because of course we've had, in terms of fire retardants, for example, right? We've had we have to get rid of X product, but then the substitute is just as bad.
exactly.
So is something happening in Europe that is working?
Yes. So in Europe, we ban 11 products from chemicals from personal care products, 11 in the United States. In Europe, it's 1,328. That's just to give you an example, banned from personal care products. In Europe, they have a principle called REACH, which is that a chemical has to be proven to be safe before it's put into commerce. So it's a very different legislative process. It doesn't work perfectly, and they have problems too, of course, but they're way ahead of us on this.
Does it reveal itself in any studies yet about whether they've improved the health and the reproductive health of women or men in Europe?
I believe so, but I can't.
Nothing peer reviewed that you're going to
Yes.
offer.
Right.
Oh, fair enough. Fair enough. You're sticking to the science. I understand that.
Yes.
You ask in this book a few times, where is the outrage on this issue? So where is the outrage on this issue? What happens to keep most of us not outraged about something that's affecting our generations and the generations to come?
I think it's the smoking gun problem. I think that because you have an exposure and the effect is seen much later, that's one thing. And the other thing is that the effects on any individual are small. So it's like lead poisoning. Lead lowers IQ a couple percentage points for an incremental increase. And that might not matter for a particular child, but if you have a whole population whose IQ is shifted by several percentage points, that makes a big difference. And so you don't see the changes on an individual level. And that's what we experience. So we don't experience harm from these things.
I also think that there's another factor at play. I agree with Shanna that is happening, but I also think that there is both denial that this is happening and also a lack of awareness that these products and these chemicals are harmful. I really do think that, as Shanna mentioned earlier, people assume the government and our regulatory bodies are protecting us. And so they just sort of have blind trust in that. And they also just don't know the science because this is not taught in school,
Right. And it's not taught in medical school either.
Right. And there's
right?
there's actually sort of an outcry among some medical students to get better environmental health curricula into the medical schools so that they can learn about these effects.
I mean, you had this one thing, AGD, just the distance between the anus and the scrotum. I'm not quite sure if I have that right, but that it's a very easy way to see if there's an endocrine disruption taking place. Exactly. Those sorts of things are not being drilled into endocrinologists or other scientists.
That measure was used in animal studies for 100 years before we used it in our studies. It hadn't been used
with humans.
Yeah, it hadn't been used in humans. It had been used in animal studies. But we said, so there's a phenomenon called the phthalate syndrome, which was defined and found in animals. And people were very concerned about it. And when I heard about it, I got concerned about it. And so I conducted studies to look for it in humans. And so I had to measure this AGD, which, by the way, kids call the taint and the grundle and the gooch, by the way. So it's on the street. But scientists don't use it. And until we started we started using, and now it turns out very, very interesting and useful. It reflects not only changes in males, but also in females. So when the mother has PCOS, she has excess testosterone. That's goes along with having
PCOS is polycystic ovary syndrome.
Polycystic ovary syndrome. So that's a condition in which the mother has excess testosterone. And guess what? When she has a girl, that AGD is longer than expected because that girl is getting more testosterone. So this measure tells you how much testosterone the fetus was exposed to in utero. And if it's too little in a male, he'll have the short AGD, which, by the way, predicts low sperm count when he's an adult.
Right.
Right. So it's important.
I want to stick with the question of outrage, and then I'm going to come back to a question about what this looks like in 2045, even though you're trying to be positive about it all. But folks, if you have questions before we wrap, love to hear some of your questions too. So get your questions in here before we're done. We see advertisements all around us for air fresheners and the products that go into our clothing, and of course the products that go on our faces and on our skin. If they're that dangerous, shouldn't we be treating them the way we have treated cigarettes? And yet we don't. So I mean, obviously there's a huge corporate interest in, or a huge economic interest in not doing that. How do we tame that beast? How do we get people to see it differently? Is this all going to be individual actions, or do we need action?
The Surgeon General in 1964 said that cigarettes cause cancer. You know that? Yeah. And here we are with high levels of smoking in many places in the world. So, I don't know how much evidence it takes to get people to change their behaviors, but that behavior, has taken a very long time to change. And in some places it hasn't changed at all. So I don't know what it'll take. I think what it'll take is not being able to get pregnant yourself, or your kids can't get pregnant, or somebody you're close to can't get pregnant. And then you start to listen maybe and change your behavior. Or like the man that Stacey was talking about, he wasn't able to give his sample to the sperm bank. And so he cleaned up his act. I think that's going to take a personal impact before people are going to change their behavior.
What about you, Stacey? The outrage? I mean, you have kids. You're feeling this issue.
I do. And oh my gosh, sweaty boys after soccer, their idea of fixing the issue is to spray Axe all over their bodies. Not good. I don't know if you know what Axe is, Shanna. It is so potent as a fragrance, and it's nasty. So I basically said no, well, I'm not going to name names, but no personal body sprays, no air fresheners. If we use things that have scent, it's botanically based scents that I buy. And there are plenty of companies that will provide that you can find at your local hardware store, or like a grocery store, like Whole Foods, like a Whole Foods market. So I think a lot of it is awareness, and it goes back to the education component, not just in medical schools, but in biology and sex ed in schools. Kids aren't aware of these connections and these influences. And so I think we need to sort of make all of this part of the cultural conversation.
And I also think that men particularly are not willing to hear that there's anything wrong with their sperm. They're good to go, they're male, they're potent, they're not gonna, hear that there's any problem going on until there is. And then, so, we're saying that men should have a checkup like women have a checkup for their reproductive health. People should be aware of the importance of their reproductive health. It's not something that people consider. They worry about their heart health, but they don't worry about their reproductive health. And we're hoping to change that. So.
Isn't that interesting? That's a really great idea, isn't it? Just to get men to see themselves from the time they're young as biological beings.
Right.
I guess, huh? That would be very helpful. How effective are the alternatives in reaching people? So, for example, there's a whole line of green chemistry going on right now. There are many chemists who are trying to create green chemical products. Is it moving into the marketplace in a way that is going to have some real impact, or are they more marginal?
I think
Either one of you.
I have friends who are working on this. A lot of green chemistry has problems as was originally formulated, but I believe that it can be done. I think that it is possible to make these replacements in a way that's a lot safer. It's going to take fighting, I'm afraid, with established chemical manufacturers, and to do that, we need a lot of political clout. So we need people to advocate for this and demand it. Otherwise, why should they make changes?
Well, the book is Countdown: How Our Modern World is Threatening Sperm Counts, Altering Male and Female Reproductive Development, and Imperiling the Future of the Human Race. That was your subtitle. So you're not shying away from it. We are in a bit like we're the canaries in the coal mine here. So 2045, before you give me the good spin, what's it going to look like in 2045 around the world if we continue to take these products into our environment?
Well, nobody knows, of course. I'm a statistician, and I hate to extrapolate past my data because we're taught you're not supposed to do that, right? But I put that curve up there because, of course, we can extend the line and we can see where it hits zero. Whether it's going to or not is another question. And by the way, biological systems do not tend to follow straight lines. So the chances are they're following an S shape. So it's going to go closer and closer and closer to zero. And it's going to level off slower and slower and slower. That's the way biological functions tend to operate. However, that's way too low. When we get below 40 million per milliliter, we're already getting into the point that it takes longer and longer to get pregnant. Anything below 40 million per milliliter. So we're nearly there now. And so what we're going to be seeing if we don't change our lifestyles pretty quickly, we're going to see more and more dependence on assisted reproduction and smaller families. And by the way, I should just mention, talking about smaller families, it's very difficult to turn that around. Even if—
What do you mean?
What?
What do you mean?
Well—
that it's difficult to turn it around.
Okay, so right now in Korea, they have 0.85 children per couple. It takes 2.1 children per couple to replace us, okay? And 0.85 is lower than ever reported. In those countries, governments have tried to get people to have more children, and they can't do it. They're paying them to do it, and they can't turn this around. So that's what I see, a danger up ahead, that, for biological and psychological reasons, people will not be able to reproduce themselves.
Another point that's worth noting here is a lot of people have blamed the decline in birth rate around the world, but particularly in Western countries, on people wanting smaller families and also on people waiting until older ages to have children. And that may be part of it, but it's much more than that. It's everything that we have been talking about tonight. But one nuance that people don't appreciate or they aren't aware of is that a lot of these environmental exposures, the chemical impacts, hit harder when you're older. The impact is that much bigger on a woman or a man in his 40s than somebody in his or her 20s. And so waiting longer and having all these chemical exposures is a bad double whammy.
And accruing lifestyle damage as well.
Right.
So,
I see.
Yes.
I think you wrote somewhere of 5 possible criteria for what makes a species endangered. Only one needs to be met. The current state of affairs for humans meets at least 3.
Yep.
Yikes.
Yeah.
And of course, and then there's all the other species that are being affected from these chemicals and all the other things happening in the world as well. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how am I sleeping tonight? I guess I know where the outrage is. It's right here. Okay. Any last words? Anything you want to leave us with? I just wanted to go into the bleakness for a minute there. So anything you want to leave us with, both of you?
Well, I think that we've done very hard things as a species. I think about our Mars lander, and we can do, you know, very, very difficult things. I think we can do this, but we have to want to. And that's what I'm hoping that the book will help us want to make a change.
And my feeling is we owe it to ourselves and the planet. So it's kind of a moral imperative in my view.
Yeah. All right. Very good. I appreciate you both taking the time to talk with us. That's it's powerful stuff. Countdown. Thank you both. Candace.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, it was really nice talking to you. Thanks so much. Okay.
Yeah, on behalf of Town Hall, I want to thank both of you as well. And thanks for giving us some like really concrete things to walk away from. I think that's always deeply appreciated by the audience, and I want to thank the audience for watching tonight as well. I encourage you to use the link in the chat to purchase a copy of Countdown, which is a great pun for the title. I love that. So support Third Place Books if you want to purchase a copy of the book. And we'd love to have both of you in person whenever that's possible. But until then, stay safe, and I hope that you have a great night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.